All right, in this video, you're going to learn how to graph a quadratic given with just an a term. Now, we know that we can have a bx and a c at the end, but these are going to tell us to do some different things. We're going to start with very basic, just what if we have a single term with an x squared? What's that going to look like? How would we graph it on a coordinate grid? All right, first thing, let's make one up. Let's say y equals 1/2 x squared. If I'm asked to graph this, now when you start to work with these and you get a little bit along the way through them, you're going to understand what that 1/2 does. It basically is going to change the width of our parabola, parabola being that U-shaped curvature that we're going to end up with. Okay? If it's a half, it's going to be getting wider. If it's 2, it's going to get skinnier and taller and narrower. Okay? Because 2 is going to cause it to rise much quicker than 1/2 would. Now, like I said, that's going to change the width of your parabola, but how in the world do we know where to put our points and where to plot them? Make a table. So just set up a table and pick some values. So the first thing you want to choose is your x values. That's going to be your first column. Now, some people like to put work in the middle column, and I'm going to do that for the purpose of this video. So I'm going to leave this in big space here just to show how I come to find the y values. All right, this is just like work to find it. Pick values for x. Typically, you just want to choose numbers from one side, and then you can flip-flop to the other side and do like a reflection of the parabola. So I'm going to choose, I always use 0. 0 is key, very important one to choose. It's an easy one to find. Typically, you can do it without a calculator. Then you can choose numbers based on what you're seeing. Because it's 1/2, I want to choose numbers that I know are going to be able to cut evenly by 1/2. If I end up with, let's say I squared a 3, okay? If I took 3 for my value of x and I squared it, I get a 9. And then I'm going to multiply 9 times this 1/2, and I'd end up getting a decimal. I don't want to deal with decimals. So what I'd rather do is end up with positive whole numbers if possible. So if you want to, take the time to think about what are some smart choices for your values. And let's do one more 6 just to show some extra. The more we see, the more we're going to understand this. And now we're going to work these out. So I left this middle column to show the work so we can figure out how we end up with the y, and I'm going to show that now. If I put a 0 in place of the x, all I'm doing here is taking 1/2, multiplying it by whatever the value of x is, but I have to square it first. So 1/2 times 2 goes in the parentheses there, but I have to square it first. PEMDAS tells us exponents before multiplication. All right, here I'm saying 1/2 times 4 squared. And then this is 1/2 times 6 squared. So let's think about what each one of these is squared first, and then we'll just cut it in half through multiplication of 1/2. 0 squared is 0, so what's 1/2 times a 0? 2 squared is 4, so what's 1/2 times a 4? 4 squared is 16, so what's 1/2 times 16? And 6 squared is 36, so what's 1/2 times 36? And then you can pretty much figure these out pretty quickly, especially if you have a calculator on you. 1/2 times 0, 0. 1/2 times 4, 2. 1/2 times 16, 8. 1/2 times 36, 18. So now we have our x and our y. Our x value, our y value. X value, y value. X, y, x, y. List those out as you see them. 0, 0. 2, 2. 4, 8. 6, 18. Plot these points. Now notice that I only chose positive values. We're going to have to do the reflection of this parabola at the end with each one of these values to show the other side, because we can't get a U shape unless we have both sides of the U, the parabola I should say. Okay, so I'm going to plot 0, 0. I'm going to plot 2, 2, 2, 2. I'm going to plot 4, 8, 4, 8. And I'm not going to be able to fit the 618 because it doesn't go up high enough on this graph. So right now, if I were to graph, what I'm going to see is this. And remember, these are not the easiest thing in the world to draw. Just do your best to connect those dots and make it look like a U. All right, that doesn't look like a U. What's my issue? Well, let's go back to what I just said. I chose positive values only. So I want to do the reflection. This is going to be our vertex, which you learned about in the previous video. This is our minimum, our lowest point. But if I went 2, 2, I can go -2, +2, and put that other side. If I went 4, 8, I can go -4, 8. And what I'm going to end up getting is the other side, the reflection, to my parabola. And there it is. I've graphed y equals 1/2 x squared. Now, what if I wanted to make this really, really wide? Well, if I change my value to something like 1/8, that's going to cause this to be a much wider U shape than the 1/2. The smaller the fraction gets, the wider your U will get, or your parabola. The higher your number gets, if I change that to an 8, this would be very, very skinny and tall. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense and you got the idea of how to start graphing these. Biggest thing is make a table, choose values for x, plug them into the equation, work it out, and find what y would equal. All right, good luck on your upcoming test.